Today we're diving into a historical narrative of temple destruction in India, one that spans several centuries. We're going to follow a specific chronicle of invasions and their impact, based entirely on the source material we'll be exploring. So where is all this information coming from? Well, our guide for this entire explainer is Chapter 4 of the book History of Hindu-Mesia and Hindu Genocides. It's written by Bijit Prasanta, and he has a pretty unique background. He's a former theoretical particle physicist who became an investment banker. To really set the stage, the author starts by citing the historian Will Durant. This quote is used right at the beginning of the book to frame the gravity of the events that are about to be described. Okay, so where does this chronicle actually begin? The book takes us all the way back to the 8th century, to the first invasions into the Indian subcontinent. The narrative kicks off with Muhammad bin Qasim's invasion of Sindh. According to the source, the very first target was the port city of Dabal. The book says it fell after what's described as a brutal 3-day massacre. So what was the intent behind this invasion? To answer that, the author points to the Chachnama, a 13th century chronicle. The book presents this quote as a direct order from Hajjaj, who is the governor of Iraq, to bin Qasim, spelling out exactly how the conquered people were to be treated. The book then jumps forward a couple of hundred years to the Ghaznavid Empire. The author really highlights the reign of Mahmud of Ghazni, who, as the source puts it, vowed to wage a holy war against Hind every single year. 400,000! To put things into perspective, the author presents an analysis based on population data from that time. And based on that, the book estimates that by the year 1005 AD, Mahmud's campaigns had already resulted in the death or enslavement of about 400,000 Hindus. The book tries to get into the motivations behind these campaigns by citing historical chroniclers. This quote from Al-Utbi is used to describe an attack in 1019, and it suggests that the primary goal wasn't just plunder, but slaughter. Now, the book makes it very clear this pattern didn't just end with the Ghaznavids. The narrative continues, showing how these events paved the way for the Delhi Sultanates, starting with the Ghurids and the Mamluks. The chapter explains that as the Ghaznavids' power started to fade, the Ghurids rose to take their place. The author's account really zooms in on Muhammad Ghori's general, Qutbuddin Aibak, who is described as leading even more campaigns into northern India. To give you a sense of the sheer scale of the destruction, the book points to an invasion of Nahwala in 1197. The author cites a chronicle, the Taj-ul-Masiri, which claims that nearly 50,000 people were, and I quote, dispatched to hell by the sword. Just a staggering number for a single campaign. The narrative then follows this really interesting transfer of power. Qutbuddin Aibak had once been a slave himself. And then his own slave, a man named Iltutmish, went on to found the Mamluk dynasty, which we now know as the Delhi Sultanate. According to the source, this pattern of invasion and destruction just kept on going under his successors, like Sultana Razia. All right, this historical account just keeps rolling right through the next dynasties of the Delhi Sultanate. Now we're going to turn to the period of the Khiljis and the Tughlaqs, as it's all detailed in the source. A major figure in this section is Alauddin Khilji. The author describes his rise to power as being incredibly ruthless, noting that he actually assassinated his own uncle and predecessor just to seize the throne of Delhi. To really help us understand the magnificence of the places being targeted, the author includes this poetic description of the Rudra Mahalaya temple. I mean, just listen to these details. 1,600 pillars, 18,000 images set with rubies and pearls. It just paints a picture of unbelievable grandeur. And then you see this. What a stark contrast, right? This is a photograph of the temple's ruins, taken way back in 1885. The author explicitly connects the dots, attributing the destruction of that magnificent temple we just heard about to the forces of Alauddin Khilji during his invasion of Gujarat. You know, the book also points out that destruction didn't always mean total demolition. In some cases, sacred sites were actually repurposed. The author gives a specific example, the Indranarayana Swami Temple in Telangana, which the source says was converted into the Deval Mosque. When we get to the Tughlaq dynasty, the book focuses heavily on the reign of Firoz Shah Tughlaq. It recounts this horrifying incident of a Brahmin being publicly burned on a pile of wood for refusing to convert. It also notes that Firoz Shah was the first sultan to impose the jizya. That's a tax on non-Muslims, specifically on the Brahmin community.
The chapter builds to what feels like a climax, one final devastating invasion. This section covers the campaign of Tamar, which the author frames as a particularly brutal and final onslaught.
So, Tamar's invasion in the late 14th century is where this chapter's chronological overview ends. The source portrays his campaign as a period of just exceptional violence, basically capping off this centuries-long narrative we've been following. Now, here's a really fascinating connection to the modern day that the author makes. The book talks about the slaves who were taken from Punjab during Taimur's invasion. And get this, it points to modern DNA research that has reportedly confirmed Punjabi genetic markers in gypsy populations all across Europe and even in South America.
So, as we wrap up this look into the source material, it really leaves us with a powerful question. After chronicling centuries of destruction across so many different dynasties, what does this specific historical account tell us about the nature of cultural resilience and how cultures change when they're faced with such prolonged, intense pressure?